Thanks for inviting us in at 6 o'clock and breaking tonight. Richard Allen found guilty on all counts for the murders of Abby Williams and Libby German back in 2017. This is a case that has held the small town of Delphi captive since those two teen girls were found dead near the Monon High Bridge, and now finally some closure for this community. Tonight our live team coverage takes us to Delphi, where our crews learned of that verdict just hours ago.
That's right, Scott. We learned of that verdict around 2:20 today, and we've been bringing you updates of all the information since then. Bob Siegel was in the courtroom as that verdict was handed down.
And it was fast, Ann. It was less than 3 minutes that the jury was inside the courtroom, handed their verdict sheet to Judge Gall. She read guilty, 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 all 4 counts against Richard Allen. I was sitting in the first row of the gallery, about 15 feet right behind Richard Allen at the time that the verdict was read. Richard Allen initially very little reaction or emotion. At one point, he turned back to his wife and his mother and said, "Are you okay?" I was able to see the families to my left, the families of Abby and Libby. They were clutching hands, they hugged each other, they smiled. Initially, again, not a lot of reaction because Judge Gall had asked for there to be no outbursts in the courtroom when the verdict was read. But after the judge and the jury left the courtroom, at that point, there was embracing. In fact, one of the state police investigators gave Prosecutor Nick McLeland a hug and a kiss right after the judge left the courtroom. The families, again, at that point, they were hugging openly and showing more emotion. And Emily, I know you were outside, and there was also some additional emotion once the families got outside.
I mean, a lot of emotion. Families hugging, crying, tears of joy. I mean, I guess if we can put it that way, right? It's a bittersweet situation for them, right? Because these girls aren't coming back. You know, there's a gag order still in place, but Becky Patty, Libby's grandma, she posted probably about an hour and a half after the verdict was read this picture on Facebook. If we can zoom in, that's Libby as a little girl, and she's wearing a superhero cape. And you know, throughout this trial, police called Libby a hero. She said she and Abby were not just victims, but they were heroes. Libby for rolling on that video, having the presence of mind to roll that video of Bridge Guy that helped lead law enforcement to her and Abby's killer. And of course, Abby, concealing that phone under her, and that the police were able to find, and they were able to go through that phone and see that video, and that video helped lead them, helped create this timeline, and helped lead them to Richard Allen. Kelsey Siebert posted on, formerly known as Twitter, on X, that Kelsey Siebert, that is Libby's older sister. She is the last person, and she dropped the girls off that day at the Mears entrance. She posted this on X, this quote. She was retweeting, "Crime is almost always senseless and the justice system imperfect. A guilty verdict does not undo the damage of crime. It cannot bring back the victims." And so, I mean, that is really the reality of this, right? We have this guilty verdict. The family's thrilled, but these young ladies are not coming back. They would be in their 20s. You know, they would be 20 right now, and at the prime of their life. And so, we've always wanted, we say, to keep the focus on them, and that's what we want to do. So, Becky Patty keeping the focus on her granddaughter today with that beautiful picture of her as a little girl, is a superhero, and she is a superhero. They are both superheroes. Right.
They were in 8th grade, Libby German 14, Abby Williams 13 at the times that they were murdered, and today Richard Allen is found guilty.
He is, and the jury, it took 4 days of deliberations. It took 17 days of testimony, nearly 400 exhibits that they looked at, had to sort through testimony in some cases that was completely contradictory from expert witnesses on the part of the state and on the part of the defense. They sorted through all that, and of course, you know, it has to be without a reasonable doubt. And today they found without reasonable doubt that Richard Allen is guilty in the murders of Abby and Libby.
Yeah, so that's the latest here from Delphi. Scott, just a tough day, a tough time for this community. Perhaps this chapter is over, but we know that the appeals process, the legal process, that perhaps it could extend on. The sentencing is set for December 20th, and that's when we'll find what will be the penalty for Richard Allen for these crimes. Now, he has already been in custody for 2 years, so that's something also that's going to be taken into consideration in his sentencing. And Emily, each count, some 40-some years for each count.
45 to 65 for each count, for all 4 counts. And so, you know, as our legal expert Katie Jackson Lindsay talked about, it would hard to imagine that they would run them concurrently, right? Because these are 2 separate lives. So perhaps consecutively, you would imagine. But you know, we have to wait and see till December 20th, and then once that happens, once the sentence happens, then Richard Allen's defense team can start the appeals process.
Richard Allen, 52 years old, found guilty today in the murders of Abby Williams and Libby German. Back to you.
All right, Ann, Bob, and Emily, great job. Thank you so much from Carroll County. Let's talk with our 13 News legal analyst, Katie Jackson Lindsay. She's a former deputy prosecutor, now a criminal defense attorney. What's your reaction to the verdict?
Well, I'm surprised by the verdict. As a criminal defense attorney, I absolutely felt that there was doubt there. But as an attorney, you respect the verdict. This jury worked really hard. They listened. They asked a lot of questions, and ultimately they had a lot to work through, and they did, and this is their verdict, and we have to absolutely respect that.
What is the evidence that was brought by the state that you think the jury said, yeah, he's guilty?
I think it had to be the confessions. Again, even as a defense attorney, hearing those confessions, that is hard to overcome. It is really hard to convince a jury that your client didn't do something that your client is saying over and over again that he did do. And so I think that there were some challenges with some of the state's other evidence, but I think that was very strong evidence for the state, those confessions.
What would be the grounds for appeal for the defense team?
Well, we have to remember each of those preliminary issues that the defense raised prior to trial, the issues related to whether they should be able to introduce evidence of other potential suspects, any issue that they raised prior to trial that was denied, they could appeal any of those things at the next level. There will also be an appeal, I'm assuming, based on the sufficiency of the evidence. So that's a common appeal you often see in criminal cases, and essentially the defendant is saying there was not enough evidence to convict me of this charge. And so I think we'll see an appeal on those grounds as well. And then there will likely be an appeal of whatever sentence Richard Allen gets, because I don't think we should expect the minimum sentence in this case.
All right, and again, sentencing will be on December 20th. Katie Jackson Lindsay, I know you'll be joining me tonight for the Delphi debrief, which is at 10 o'clock. I want to thank you so much for all of the insight that you've given us. And again, just want to remind you that we're going to take this deep dive tonight on WTHR Plus. Delphi debrief. We'll be back with Emily and Bob tonight taking a look at this landmark verdict. You can stream it on Apple TV, Amazon Fire Stick, or Roku.